On this day in Seventh-Day Adventist history, April 3, 1882. This article was published in the Review and Herald in 1923 and written by O.C. Godsmar, son of Richard Godsmar. And it starts like this. At the close of his sermon in the Battle Creek Church, one Sabbath in early winter of 1880, as Elder James White stepped down from the pulpit, he remarked to my father, "Uncle Richard, don't leave until I see you. I want to talk with you and hold a minute after the crowd gets away." Standing by my father's side, I listened as any small boy would, wondering what Brother White had to say. When the congregation had gone, Elder White came up to where we were standing. And as I recall his words, they were something like this. "Brother Godsmar, I've got a man up at the house that I just do not know what to do with. He's been hanging around for the last 2 weeks, wanting to preach. He says he knows that the Lord has called him to the work, and maybe he has, but he doesn't look much like a preacher to me. He is devoted and seems like a good man. We hear him praying in his room a good deal, but he has no education, can scarcely talk at all, and I don't believe we can ever make a preacher out of him. I wish you people would take him out to the farm. He can work enough to pay for his room and board, and maybe by next summer we can let him go out with a tent. I wish you would see if there is any preach in him. His name is King, George King." On our way home that afternoon, Father drove by Elder White's home and took in a tall, slim, seedy-looking man whose dark, rusty brown overcoat looked much the worse for wear. He placed in the back of our buggy a little old trunk which contained all of his worldly possessions he had. He was given a comfortable room across the hall from mine, and I remember how often I would be awakened in early hours by his earnest prayers before the rest of the family were even astir. He helped about with the chores, but much of the time he spent studying his Bible. Mother helped him to arrange his sermons and tried to teach him how a minister should present his subjects, for he seemed to have no education, no ability, no initiative at all. But he knew that the Lord had called him to work. He used to go alone into the front room, and there, standing before the law and the prophet charts that hung upon the wall, tried to explain the message to the empty chairs he assembled before him. One day, toward spring, Brother Edmund's family, the only family of Sabbath keepers there was for several miles around, came to visit us, and it was soon arranged that after dinner, Brother King should preach his first sermon. My aunt, Mrs. Evans, one of the early Sabbath keepers, was sent for and came over to help swell the crowd. This was to be his trial sermon, and was to decide whether the Lord had endowed him with the gift to preach. When it was decided that the time for the test had come, poor Brother King refused to eat any dinner. And although it was a cold winter day, he spent the time out in the barn in earnest prayer to God. After dinner, the chairs were arranged, and an earnest season of prayer was engaged in before inviting him in. He made a blundering failure. His talk was short, anything but to the point. As he left the room, he tearfully asked that we pray earnestly that the Lord's will might be done. After another season of prayer and a long pause, for no one seemed to want to express an adverse opinion, Mother stood up and said, as best I can remember, that it was clear to her that Brother King was not called to preach in the manner that others preach. He could never go into the desk and hold a crowd, but he could be a fireside preacher. That is, he could go to the homes of the people, preach to them around the firesides, that he could give away tracts and talk the truth to people where they were. Father, who stuttered so he could never take any part in public meetings, said that if Brother King would only do that, he would gladly buy all the tracts he would ever need, and he would furnish him with whatever money he might require, as he would have no possible way of obtaining money on his own. It was soon arranged that as long as he devoted his life to that work, he should always have a home with us, should never want for food and clothes or money, and his trash should always be supplied. Brother King accepted this as the will of God and as called to untried fields. His clothes were put in respectable shape, and the next Monday he started out. He carried a little satchel over his shoulder, the best he had, full of tracts. His pockets, too, were bulging with papers to give away, and he had $2 in his pocket, enough to last him until the next Friday night, when he was to return and go to church with us. Friday came, and no Brother King. Sabbath morning, and still no Brother King. We felt no small concern as to his whereabouts. When we reached the church in Battle Creek, he was there, so full of joy that he could hardly know what to tell of the rich blessings that he had been his to enjoy as he had gone to the homes of the people and tried to tell them of the glorious truths that had filled his own soul. He had not only given away a large number of his tracts, but he had actually sold 62 cents worth. The next Monday, he again started out with renewed vigor, another satchel full of tracts, and this time with $2.62 in money. That was his last visit to our home. That week, he succeeded in converting nearly his whole satchel full of literature into cash. From that time on, he bought his tracts directly from the Review and Herald Publishing House. During the summer, he sold a good many dollars worth of tracts and books, mostly John Kellogg's 1,600-page book, Home Handbook of Domestic Hygiene and Rational Medicine. In the fall, he urged his case strongly for the president of the General Conference that they should follow Ellen White's counsel. Testimony 29, page 11. If there is one work more important than another, it is that of getting before the public our publications, which will lead men to search the Scriptures. And the way to accomplish this would be through canvassing. The General Conference decided to prepare him a special issue of thoughts on Daniel and the Revelation, binding the two books together into one. I remember how he urged the matter in his blundering way, telling them that if the elder Smith would only take his engraving tool and would engrave another picture of the great and terrible beast, of Daniel 7, making it look larger and more fierce, and then just print it in the red ink, he could sell these books readily. George King took this book the morning it came off the press and sold the first copy to D.W. Rivas. On this day, April 3, 1882, George King started the canvassing work for the Seventh-Day Adventist Church. The man whom Elder White did not know what to do with became the pioneer of this wonderful means of carrying this message to the earth's remotest bounds.